So hopefully you guys recognize this guy. His name's Albert Einstein. He said education is what remains after one has forgotten what one has learned at school. And so we're going to go over a lot of information today. Hopefully the idea being that we're going to be able to equip you guys with good information that you can share with your clients, hopefully help make better financial decisions, more sound decisions about rent versus buy. Realizing the fact though that some of this might go in one ear and may not stay there. So please utilize Jeff, Christina, and myself after this session. We're happy to have a one-on-one with you at any time if we can recap any of the information that we've given you today. Okay, let's go through our agenda. So Jeff's going to lead us off with talking about some of the pros and cons of rent versus buy. This is some of the more elementary information, I would say, in terms of just a refresher, going over the basics of a rent versus buy decision. The key here is that this is rent versus buy. This is not always buy, never rent. And that's a key distinction here, because we're not going to put somebody in a house that doesn't deserve or want to be in a house. Our job is to help them make those good, sound financial decisions around rent versus buy, not just always buy, no matter what your commission check says. Who are the most likely first-time buyers? So we're going to give you some information on that. There's a lot of good data and demographics around our first-time buyers, and it's important to understand your target market, because it's important to understand how to address your target market when you're having a conversation around rent versus buy. So a lot of good information that I'll be sharing with you there. Then we're going to have some information on getting the conversation started, how to best approach these folks who are looking to make that rent versus buy decision. And then we're going to do a little bit of role play. Christina and I are going to do some role play so you guys can see how this process works. I will play Greg the loan officer, Greg the realtor, however you want to put that together. Christina will play our renter. And then we're going to do a little bit more in terms of analyzing that rent versus buy decision, giving you guys some tools that you can utilize that I think are very beneficial in terms of making a more formal rent versus buy decision. We're going to talk about some of the down payment assistance programs that are out there right now. Many of you have heard of them, but maybe you don't necessarily know how to utilize them. And those are important to bring up in conversations with folks that are considering a buy decision. And then if we have some time after all of that, we will do a little bit of Q&A.
So pros and cons, and I think Greg had a really good just reminder that it's not just buy, and not rent. In some cases, the decision and distinction between doing both of those, it really is going to be beholden on that individual that you're going to be working with. So some of the pros to actually renting, okay? There are some. Minimal upfront cost, location flexibility, usually on a kind of one-year lease, if you will. So if you need to relocate, or if you want to get closer to an urban area or to the city or where things are happening, you have that flexibility. Minimal maintenance and repairs. So how many times have you dealt with a renter that you are talking about buying? This comes up, where what happens if the hot water heater breaks? Who do they call? HMS. That's what they own the house. The owner, landlord, the property management company. It's usually just a part of that fixed fee that they pay on a monthly basis. A lot of people, especially if this hasn't been a conversation as they get into buying, they say, what do you mean? I don't just call a property manager to... No, that's an extra cost. It's a cost of being a homeowner. Amenities. So a lot of the apartment communities, especially if you're not renting from an individual landlord, have some great amenities. And that's where, again, if you're looking at a townhouse or a single family, or if it's not in a PUD or an HOA, those amenities might be something that they're going to miss. So that could be a potential pro. Cons. So this is where a lot of our conversation today will focus, especially as we get into calculations about the cost of owning versus buying long-term, or renting versus buying long-term. So no tax advantages. And for folks, especially the millennial population, and we have some great statistics on that cohort today that we'll go over, they don't truly understand the benefits financially from a tax perspective and the power of a very similar mortgage cost and rent cost. So that could be a con as far as renting goes. Housing costs are not fixed. How often have you had one of your renters that you potentially worked with, they paid their monthly rent on time, and all of a sudden at the end of the year they get the nice letter that says thanks, or here's your new lease, and we're giving you a cost of living adjustment. So it's not level. It often will increase. Not very often does that decrease. Subject to terms of a lease, certainly. Less privacy, transient neighbors, and Greg will show a pretty interesting clip which she'll hit home on that specific one.
Right on that.
Maybe not the transient. I think they might have wanted that person to be transient, but it'll be a nice one nonetheless. All right, so the pros and cons of buying. So we try to make the list a little bit longer on the pro side of buying to cater to our audience, a group of realtors here. So building equity and nest egg. So there are so many articles, so many stats out there that shows that the net worth of someone that owns property, owns real estate, is significantly higher long term than that of someone that rents. Okay, and there's some great articles. We can certainly send those links out to you, but those are things that you can allow another third-party professional give some of those concepts to your clients if they're kind of on that cusp and recognizing whether or not this is a good decision. From a nest egg perspective, this might be something that you individually subscribe to, but a lot of times you have a 30-year mortgage, you pay that off around retirement. A lot of people will leverage that property value as part of that retirement nest egg that they've put together for themselves. Is that something that you've talked to clients about in the past? Lower tax liability through deductions. And so this is a critical component and huge advantage financially. And again, we know this in the room, but it's about how we have that conversation with our consumer, our client, and really showcase the power of that financially. And again, we have some great items to go through with that. Predictable costs. So this is where we try to focus on the ability, especially in this interest rate environment. It's not free money, of course, but after the tax deductible components of it, you are borrowing money at historic lows. And this is something that the opportunity cost of those potential renters that are considering buying, that the opportunity cost of waiting 6 months, a year, 2 years from now, it couldn't necessarily price them out of that property that they may be looking at today as far as what they qualify for debt to income wise. But the predictable cost component of it is certainly the principal and interest. You're buying at today's interest rate, at today's market value of that home, which in most cases, not all cases, and we can't take that to print, of course, but the average over the course of a 5, 10, 15, 20, 30-year period, the property value or market value of that home should go up if we made a good decision up front. And certainly some folks during the 2008 recession may say otherwise as far as that home value, but a lot of the markets here, at least locally, have rebounded since then at least. But that being said, that's the predictable component of it. Sense of community. So how many times have you talked to a client that say they really want to have roots somewhere? They want to build a family, they want to get that started, they want to live in an environment, maybe it is an HOA or a planned urban development where there's a really nice sense of community, or it could be in a rural area. But sense of community is a huge thing that we hear. Greater privacy. So again, this will, we've already seen Greg's video that he found for us to watch today, but certainly from a privacy standpoint, this is something that is a really big factor, whether it's from an entertaining perspective or just that sense of, this is something that I want to put myself in a position to have that privacy is great, and pride of ownership. And so that sense of community, I think it is a little bit understated, and there's certainly some other advantages that, again, when you're having that overarching professional conversation with your client, can really lead down to, again, if this is a person or a couple that is wanting to start a family, that is wanting to put down roots in a place for a long period of time, this could be a great conversation to get into. Prior to ownership. So although if you do live in an HOA, you might not be able to change the color of your door, you will certainly see, at least in the communities, even if they do have individual landlords. So let's say it's an investment property for some homeowner. Oftentimes you will see that home a little bit more neglected than somebody that does own that house and it's a principal residence. So pride of ownership is something that for most folks here are really going to take a lot of affinity towards. So there are some cons, unfortunately, right? I know that this is how all of us in the room make a living, but there are some cons. And so especially if you compare to some of the pros on the renting slide that we just had, it's important to really have a conversation around. And part of what our responsibility is as a professional isn't to steer a client in one way or another, but is to allow them to be educated on the pros and cons of doing both. And hopefully it leads down a path where we are going to have our services used at some point, but most of our clients will certainly appreciate the candid, open, and transparent conversation about these topics. So time and financial commitment. So there are going to be some things, especially if you're not someone that is purchasing a condo. If you're going from renting to a townhouse or single family even, there's going to be some additional costs potentially. If that roof needs to be repaired, if that HVAC system goes up. And there's some things that we can do with a home warranty, perhaps in that first year, a really good home insurance to be able to combat some of those elements, but there could be some additional financial aspects of owning versus renting. Risk of short-term value depreciation. This will certainly be evident as we take a look at some of the calculators that everyone in the room is currently using or may want to use in the future, that if somebody is going to potentially be relocating the next 1, 2, 3 years and not looking to keep that property as an investment while they move to a different city for a job relocation or move overseas, it might not be to their advantage to purchase, because there are obviously costs associated with purchasing, closing costs up front, as well as selling closing costs on the back end there. Repairs and maintenance, we talked about that, and certainly the upfront expenses. There are fees, closing costs, and although there are some great down payment assistance programs, there may be some type of outlay of funds for your clients. So I briefly hinted this before, but our job as professionals, and I've always viewed this, especially from a financial sense, as a fiduciary responsibility. Certainly I want to be profitable to my bank and to my institution, but we have a fiduciary responsibility to our clients to always do what's in their best interest. And so I've always looked at this as, I'm here to educate. I'm here to, if you have questions, answer them. If you aren't asking questions, which a lot of our first-time home buyers aren't, I'm anticipating what they should be asking and providing some education centered around those topics. But the reality of that homeownership, it is not for everybody. Can we all say that real quick? It's not for everybody?
Not for everybody.
Okay, now that we've all come to terms with that, I think we're in a better situation here, and it isn't. And that is a reality that unfortunately led to some of the demise of the housing industry in the late 2000s, because we got caught up in this American dream and thought that every single person should own a home. And some people can't handle that responsibility. If you have somebody, I think about it from a budget perspective. If somebody can't balance their checkbook today on whatever their income is, if they win the lottery, they're probably still going to be in that same situation because it's more of a behavior scenario. And it's the same thing and type of concept when it comes to home ownership. Trusted advisor. So oftentimes, especially when you think about a real estate professional or especially in our industry on the lending side, you hear salesperson, and people kind of conjure up the old school used car sales professional and those types of things. And there's certainly an aspect of what we do that is selling, okay? Especially in ours, where we're competing against interest rates, or if you're up for a listing, you're selling yourself in terms of getting that. But we're not really sales professionals when it comes to our client interactions, all right? We want to be considered a trusted advisor. And I've done trainings in the past with, there's this peak and valley between being a really, truly consultative, trusted advisor and somebody that is just a really good transaction specialist. And I think anybody out here can go out there and sell homes, but it really takes a special breed of individual to be able to be a trusted advisor, be a connector, have your clients come to you for other professional advice. And that's when we know we've really reached kind of the pinnacle of that relationship with a client. Understanding the reality in terms of better address client points of indifference. And so before I hop into the next slide, hopefully some of these are actually going to be addressed here, but what are some of the, not necessarily objections, but what are some of the comments that renter that you have as a potential client looking to potentially buy a home, what are some of the things that they say as drawbacks or points of indifference?
They don't have a down payment.
Don't have a down payment. Thank you.
They think their credit isn't where it should be.
God, yes. Do we need to slip people money?
Exactly. What else we got?
There's one more.
The down payment, credit.
Can't afford it.
Can't afford it?
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that is one. That is a reality, and some people will certainly fall into the capability if they can't qualify for a certain program, maybe based on income. We have a lot of individuals in this area. It's highest per capita college education or college degree in the country. and there's some significant debt. Another LO back at the office, I think it takes the cake, and you guys might be able to compete with this, but between a husband and wife, they had over $400,000 of student loan debt.
Oh my gosh.
Now they're in very good professions. They'll be able to make that up at some point. But the reality is right now that they can't qualify for a home in terms of the debt-to-income ratio. And there are going to be some individuals that fall on that boat. Or I always give the example of when you got that T-shirt free in college and you got to open up that credit card and went to the bar to get your first tab. Well, you had to pay it. That could come back and bite you a little bit as far as not paying some of your credit card bills on the credit report. And certainly work with some professionals like us at Mason are going to be able to help from a credit repair standpoint. But those are all very realistic things that we'll hear from. So handling objections. So we're just starting to look. We're not sure if we're ready for this yet. What would you say as a professional real estate agent to a client that may say something of that sort there? We made eye contact, so you have to answer.
Get qualified first.
Get qualified. Oh, we love that. I love the one line that you use, and this is critical. If you've ever taken a look at Jeffrey Fox has a book called The Rainmaker, very easy read. But one of his kind of 6 killer questions that he asks is, let's give it a try, right? So it doesn't cost anything to get pre-approved. We're offering some professional advice, and we uncover things. And so whether or not they're buying a week from now, 6 months from now, a year from now, 2 years, whatever the case is, we can at least uncover some of those hurdles. So that way, when you do go to actually start looking at properties, we're going to put them in a really nice situation, and we've all built a relationship. We're a trusted advisor at that point, and they'll be good to go. The we don't objections, okay? So we hear a lot of these. We don't think our credit is good enough. We hit that one, good, okay? We don't have 20% saved down yet. Anybody heard that one? So there's this common misnomer, and it probably stems from the parents' advice or the grandparents' advice that you have to have 20% to be able to buy a house. Certainly we love buyers that have 20% down, and we're going to be able to offer very, very competitive financing options and strategies at that level. But 20% in this area, especially for a first-time home buyer, that's a substantial amount of money. And so whether it is somebody that has absolutely rock-solid credit and the lender-paid mortgage insurance or no MI option, is right for them, and that's something that, again, we'll be able to really strategize, or even if it's the pesky borrower paid monthly. There are some fantastic options that allow clients in this area to buy a house without 20% down. And so I can't tell you how many people that I've talked to at seminars that say, you mean I can buy a house without 20% down? Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about what that looks like and how financially that impacts you. We don't know if we can afford a payment on a mortgage. Well, we're certainly going to be able to showcase on some of the calculators that we professionally use to be able to help individuals out. I do think that one of the kind of negative sides of the can I afford something is that when they go look online, oftentimes that price is just principal and interest. So they have an unrealistic expectation that, I can afford a $400,000 house. Well, you forgot property taxes, you forgot your home insurance, there might be an HOA. So really talking to a professional up front can get them get the expectations aligned. This idea that not all real estate agents, not all lenders, they're not all created equal. And so if you did not have a good professional advocating for you up front that just was trying to get you into a house without fully giving you the knowledge of being a homeowner, the cost of homeownership, being that trusted advisor, it has a huge, huge, huge role to play down the road as far as that person's understanding. And a lot of you probably work with somebody that may have used a different agent on the first house that they purchased. And all of a sudden they're like, oh my gosh, nobody ever told me this before. That's a great compliment to you. Okay? We don't know if we're going to be in this area for the rest of our lives. Okay? What would you say to that type of comment? Because this is a transient area. Certainly as different administrations come in, there's influx and kind of outflux of individuals. There's a lot of international companies that have representation here. What would you say to someone that's in this kind of area?
About how long do you think you're going to be here?
Oh, great question. Very open-ended. I like it.
Treat it as an investment property.
Okay. Absolutely. Yeah, and you certainly are going to have very distinct viewpoints from that millennial cohort. I was at an event at Booz Allen, and a very young group of individuals kind of coming through and saying hi at our booth. And most of them said, I'm going to be renting for the next 5, 6, 7 years. And then I had another person come up and say, I love hearing my coworkers say that because they're going to be the ones renting from me. And you know,
I love that too.
and I was like, you're going somewhere. Let me get your contact information. Let me help you finance all your houses there. But that being said, it's, you know, there are those types of personalities and mentalities across all cohorts, but certainly in the millennial cohort there. So.